Hi, I wanted to create a little time capsule video for myself and also something that is meant to be educational for new gardeners. And today I'm going to be going through some of my supplies that have changed over the first few years that I've been a gardener, so people can learn what they might want to buy for the space that they have, or things that are necessary or not necessary in a backyard garden. So today I'm going to go over some of the different small handheld tools, the seed saving supplies that I've had, the seed starting supplies, as well as different soil amendments that I have been purchasing, getting as gifts, and just kind of acquiring in places that are maybe not a traditional place to find gardening supplies, like maybe it's a kitchen tool, for example. So I'll start off with the handheld tools. So last year I had, or no, not last year, but kind of thinking of like my first grouping of supplies to my second grouping of supplies that I got. The first type of shovel that I got was this green plastic shovel. This one, as you can see, broke. It broke when I was trying to kind of start a new in-ground gardening bed. It just wasn't really strong enough to even help kind of move around the soil. So this one broke, but I have kept it because you never know, it can still be helpful. I've used the end of this bit to kind of dig in the ground where the soil was just like really hard, and I almost wanted to like not really till it, but just kind of stir things up in a sense. So I've kept this. And then this green one has actually turned into my indoor plants shovel. I don't really do much for my indoor plants that I have here, but I've just kept this for some of the small little ones. So might end up in the garbage soon, but it's still kind of useful even though it's broken right now. And then a couple kitchen supplies that I had that I was using, again, for my indoor garden and outdoor garden in the past, was this spork. So I got this, like, I don't know, in a gift basket or something. And so I would actually often use a fork to help me take plants out of the pot that they were in and move them into the next one. So basically just acts as a mini shovel, and I did find it pretty helpful. So even just a kitchen spoon can be a super helpful gardening tool, as well as this chopstick. So this chopstick is really helpful when you're working with really tiny seedlings, or when you just need to kind of poke around the edge of something. It can be surprisingly helpful just to have a chopstick on hand. And then the first couple things that I ended up purchasing to upgrade from that set was these two handheld tools. I do think that it's important that you like the supplies that you have. So I went and got something that felt good quality, but was still within my budget. And it's kind of this nice brown cork look to it. And so I think that it's important to get something that you really like so that you take better care of it, and that you'll want to keep it for a longer time. So this shovel, as you can see, a lot sturdier than this one. So this was a really good upgrade. Kind of has a nice spot for your thumbs as well. So it's been really easy to use. And then I got a matching set of clippers. This one has an ability to adjust to a large hand or a small hand. So if you have smaller hands, that could be a good fit for you. And then the next thing that I got was a set of gloves. So I had an old set of gloves from like my dad or something like that. And then I had worked with a really prickly bush one time, and it just got all inside. Like I felt like I was getting cuts every time I put the gloves back on. So I got a new pair. I think it's important to get a pair that is kind of like water resistant on one side and is going to help stop little tiny thorns, like not rose thorns. Obviously those are going to kind of get through a pair of gloves like this, but little tiny, little spiky things. So I got a pair, and then the closer they fit to your fingers, I find that makes it a little bit easier for the dexterity when you're working with it. But honestly, I usually just use these gloves when I'm working with like huge handfuls of soil. If I'm planting soil in, I usually just use my hands. So this might not even be necessary for a new gardener, depending on kind of how sensitive your hands are and how much soil you're going to be working with. Something that I got from a thrift store that's actually a kitchen item that I really do not use and I don't really find necessary is this little fork. So I think this is actually a turkey fork. You're supposed to use two of them at the same time. But I got this because my mom used to have a gardening tool like this in her set. And so I thought maybe I would need something like this, but I honestly haven't really, unless you need to be like stirring up and doing like a mini till of your soil often. Don't really think that's too necessary. Now, this gardening tool is kind of like the one small handheld tool that I think is just like most definitely worth getting if you want to be really committed to gardening, I suppose. But this tool, it comes with a little case that you can put on your belt. It's called a hori hori. So it's different than a shovel. It is flat, it doesn't have a scoop, and it's really sharp. Mine has like a sharp edge and a sharp point and a serrated edge. The one that I have also has this little cutter, which can be helpful for opening soil bags and that if you don't want to like run and find scissors or something. It does have measurement. I haven't really used the measurement though. Perhaps I just don't garden with a lot of precision, I suppose, but it would be helpful if you needed to know how deep you're going on things. But what's really cool about this is it's kind of like a really fancy kitchen knife where the blade actually goes into the handle. So it wouldn't be possible for the handle to break off because it's like inside of this wood here. And so I find this really helpful compared to a shovel because it's really good for getting weeds out and really good for putting seeds or like seedlings that are in soil into the ground. So I'll like dig it in like this, open up a hole, and then put a seedling right in. And I find this is really helpful and often is like a little bit easier because it's not as wide as the shovel and it doesn't have the same scoop shape. So I find it just like a little bit more effective in how it does it. And then also sometimes when you're dealing with weeds that have really long roots, like if you're trying to get rid of a dandelion, for example, from your garden, you can push this down and then kind of leverage it a little bit. And this can go really far down a lot easier than a shovel does, especially since it's a little bit sharper. And so this is like the one tool, if I had to get rid of everything, I would probably keep this one, Hori Hori. But these are definitely more expensive if you get a higher quality one. So this is something that I actually waited a number of years to get. I saw a few of my gardening mentors use it and I knew I really wanted to get one. But I waited until my mom gave it to me for a gift. So yay, thanks mom for that. My mom also got me some new sets of clippers because this other one that I had was pretty good. This one goes a little wider and it's like a little bit stronger of a set of clippers and it has a foam handle to it. So if I were you, I would just get like a really solid set because if you're working with smaller things, a sturdier clipper is still going to do a good job, but then you can have a big one. I actually know somebody else who has a really tiny pair of clippers for using soft things. And so if it's like just too hard to pinch off with your fingers, a tiny set of clippers can be good too. So you don't really need like a middle clipper. I would get like a sturdy clipper and then a little delicate clipper. The middle one is almost like the least necessary, if that makes sense. And then two tools that I haven't really used much yet, but my mom also got me these. And I'm kind of curious to see how they go. Is this tool, I don't even know what it's called, but my dad said that he used it for weeding in between these rock structures that they had in their backyard. So that seems kind of cool, but haven't used that yet. And then this other one, I think it's called a sheath, but basically you hold onto plants and then you can cut it like this. And so I'm excited when I can like maybe harvest a bunch of tall flowers or herbs. I'm going to try to harvest it like that, but I haven't used it yet. So far it hasn't been necessary. And the most helpful things I've had is the Hori Hori, a solid shovel. This I honestly have used way less since getting the Hori Hori, just keep that in mind. But that's often because I just scoop with my hands instead of actually shoveling with my hands. And then a good set of clippers, something sturdy for what you're doing. And then if you mostly focus on indoor plants, a chopstick. I don't know why, but I use it all the time. And then one other thing that I'll mention in this category is also just to use what you have. I have some sticks that I've been using for my pea trellises, and I had this green rope, and I figured, hey, this is a crafting supplies, but I'm going to convert it into a gardening supplies, and I'm just going to use this to string it between the sticks so that my peas have something to grab onto as they're growing. So like some of these kitchen items, sometimes crafting items can make really good gardening supplies too. You definitely do not have to invest in gardening supplies. You truly could do everything just with your hands if you wanted to. But these are just some things that have been helpful for me and that I haven't used yet. And hopefully this helps you figure out what you might actually need if you're looking for some supplies to start your garden. So now I'm going to clear this off and we'll move on to the seed saving supplies. Okay, it looks like more than it actually is, but here's my seed saving supplies. Before I show you about the seed saving, I just wanted to show you this one other thing that I use in my garden all the time for harvesting plants. So I have found a number of these really small baskets at thrift stores. They range from like $1 to $3 depending on the store that I found them at. But I find them really helpful because I have a lot of different herbs in my yard. And so oftentimes I like just pick a few if I'm going to use them fresh. But when I want to collect a bunch to dry them, what I'll do is I'll go out with this basket, pick enough so that it's covered, and then I just put it on a flat surface in my house, and then this basket allows for enough airflow underneath to dry the different herbs that I have. So I have about 5 of these different ones, and I find these incredibly helpful, and then they're all the same size so they can just stack up and go away. And so this is a little bit nicer than the ones that have a big handle, just because again it makes it easy to stack them away. I do have one with a handle because it's fun to go out and harvest with a big basket. Or if you had a lot of veggies that you're going to harvest, this is a bit small and light for that. But I find it really nice for herb harvesting. It's also the type of thing too where if you were harvesting seeds and you wanted to collect them just like in the plant, right? Like if you're just grabbing dried plants with the seeds still in it, you could put it all in here as well. But then you'd want to go inside and get those seeds out right away. It's not really like a storage solution. It's just a way to kind of transport what you want to dry. So let's move on to the next step. So the first thing that I started with was actually just plastic bags, because this is what I had in my house. And so I had a bunch of different little tiny sandwich bags. Sometimes I would go out on bike rides around different community areas where I saw some things flowering and I wanted to go check if anything had gone to seed, and I would just shove a few plastic bags in my backpack and I'd go out and I would try to save the seeds from different community areas around, just try to find some free seeds. And so I would put them all in these plastic bags. And so I've kept all these bags in case I want to keep reusing them for that type of thing, but they aren't really as ideal as new solutions that I found, and I'll kind of explain why. But again, just want to tell you that you can most definitely go out and start saving seeds with just the stuff that you have in your own house. And then the next thing that I started to use were these little bags that you normally put veggies in at a grocery store. So now one thing about this is they do have little holes. So sometimes seeds do fall through. So for example, like poppy seeds are those tiny little black seeds. If you really shook this around, those might fall out. So you have to be like kind of mindful of the types of seeds that you're harvesting with this. But what I would do is I would go around and again, I would just shove a few of these in my bag or wherever I was going to save seeds, and then I would collect things in here. What's nice about this is that if you were collecting seeds from a plant where they're still in the plant and you're, you know, like some seed heads are really obvious and you can just pick the seeds straight into a container, but some of them you have to kind of pick the flowers of the seeds in it and then shake the seeds out of the flower. And so sometimes I would just put it in here and then I would hang this up somewhere in my house so that it could fully dry, and then I would go and take the seeds out and store the seeds. So that was just helpful. Like I would try to save my seeds when the plant was dry. You should definitely do that. Like don't do it after rain or something, because then it's more likely to just not dry that well. But I would keep it in here just so that it could dry a little bit. So things like calendula flower seeds that are quite big, they worked really well in these. I could just kind of collect them. And then the next thing that I moved on to, which I honestly think is the best way to go about it, is actually, oh no, there's a pile of seeds on this. I don't know what seeds those are, but that kind of happens when you save your own seeds. But the next thing that I decided to do was actually just use brown paper bags. So this is what I'm going to use more often going forward. I find it better than the plastic ones because it can be recycled back into your garden. And then I just find it a lot easier than the mesh because sometimes things will kind of get stuck in the mesh and it was a little bit tricky to get out. And so now what I do is I use paper bags. They're also really easy to label. So I will sometimes just write a Sharpie on here so that I can keep track of what it is that I've saved. And I could do that on the plastic bags, but the mesh, I couldn't write on it. So that was kind of the biggest downside of the mesh. It kind of has to be something that you're going to remember what the seeds are. So these plastic bags, I would open them up, put all the plants in it. And then what's really nice is there's a number of plants where it's really helpful if you can shake the seeds out. So many plants have like tiny little seeds that are tucked inside of these like little flower pods in a way. And so you could put that all in here, squeeze the top closed, and then just shake it around and make sure it's kind of full of air, and you shake it around, and then this takes the seeds out of the plant, and then they're all just kind of at the bottom of the bag. And so then you can just take out that plant matter, put it in your compost or whatever, and then you're left with seeds at the bottom. And so I found that was kind of just the best way to do it. And then you can reuse these bags. You can just cross out the last seed and write on a new one and keep reusing them. But then once they start ripping or degrading at all, you can rip these up and just put them in your garden or in your compost. So this I find the best. And then I'll show you an example of what that has kind of looked like for me. So this was wild bergamot, and I like to write the year that I harvested them so that I can help keep track. So straw flower, and I'll just roll it up and tuck it up. If you have any holes in the bag, some little seeds might fall out, so you might lose a few, but that's all good. You can just dump all the extra seeds at the bottom of your bin into your garden, and it'll be a surprise for later. So most of them do stay in the paper bags just fine. And then in around my own home and garden, what I would often do is use little small containers. I was doing some pottery for a while, so I had a bunch of cute little pottery containers that we would store up on this kind of shelf we have along the wall. And so I would just leave the seeds out to dry. So for example, if I was saving a bunch of pea seeds from my garden, I would collect all of the peas in a little bowl or something, or even this, I would dump them out, and then I would crack open all the peas, put them in here, and then I just leave it out just kind of as storage in a way. Like if you're only saving a few seeds, then you could probably just keep a few containers like this and then plant right out from these containers the next year. But I just found it helpful just to make sure that they got totally dry, a few days totally dry, and then you can put them in a container that you're going to store it in more longer term. So that was really helpful. Sometimes I would just use containers as well. This is a plastic container. Glass would be better. But like all my calendula seeds I store in here, so that can be really helpful for seeds that you have a lot of that are quite large. And then this is kind of a newer thing that I've been doing. I just got to commit to getting these seeds everywhere, don't I? To show you. Okay. This is a newer thing that I've been doing for my seed storage. So some people use like little photo boxes. I was using just a recycled kiwi container that I had from the store one time, but this is what I've been using to save all my seeds. So, I still have a couple that are in plastic bags or whatever. And so then all of the seeds that I would be buying, I can just put them in here. And then I watched a tutorial on how to make a little envelope out of a piece of paper. And this has been super helpful because I was able to put a ton of my seeds in these little homemade envelopes. And the way that they close, it's like the seeds wouldn't be able to get out of there. It's actually sometimes better than these ones you can buy at the store, because the ones at the store just have this flap. And once you open it, like sometimes they have the little stickiness to have it reseal, but this is just as good, if not better, than those reseal kind of glue strips. So I find this quite helpful. You have to make this. It takes a bit of time to just fold this up quickly. But I definitely find it's worth it because I wanted to show you the only alternative that I found for purchasing small little envelopes like this are these ones that I got at Staples. And maybe you can find them cheaper somewhere, but I found a box of 250 of them for $40. And so that's, I don't know, like 30 cents or something like that per thing, I think. I don't know what the math is on that exactly, but it kind of seems expensive. Like it's a lot cheaper to just use one sheet of paper and use your time to just fold it up. And once you seal this little envelope, it's not going to be resealable. So this is nice because you can keep opening and closing this little envelope that you've made. And then I would just write with a Sharpie or whatever right onto there. And again, you could cross it out and reuse it if you're going to use something else the next year. Yeah, anyways. And so this just kind of seems like too expensive of an option, So this is what I've been doing. And then some people say that it's good to make sure that your seeds don't have access to like any moisture or light or temperature fluctuations, and even sealing it off from the air can be nice too. And so what I've done is I just find it's nice with the paper, cheap paper solution. It might even be nice to start using paper that I could like compost as well. Well, this I guess I could compost, but yeah, anyways, again, anything that you can like buy a supply of that then can go back into your compost, that's what I'm leaning towards, because then it's something that fully gets utilized. And then whatever the price of it is, it like totally gets incorporated into my garden. And so I think that's really good value compared to something like a plastic bag. Like you can't use that, right? Like you have to get rid of it somehow. And so then what I'll do is I'll just put it in this entire plastic container just to help kind of keep it a little bit more sealed. And then I keep it off in a corner that has like not too many temperature fluctuations. And that just helps with the shelf life of your seeds. Okay, now I'm going to get our supplies for my seed starting from home, all my little pots and that. I've just grabbed a few of the supplies that I use for seed starting. So I first wanted to show you a couple of these small 4-inch pots that I've been getting. So I have kind of noticed that there is a huge quality difference between some brands of pots compared to others. So basically all of these little 4-inch pots I have just been collecting for free. So for example, sometimes people on Facebook Marketplace will say like, okay, I have 30 pots, you have to take them all, but you can have them all for free. And so things like that, I would go and pick up and just get a bunch of different pots, or different people in my own little gardening community. I would try to, you know, accumulate different supplies for myself without having to go and buy them. And then of course, obviously, if I'm going to a store and buying a potted plant, that comes with the pot. And so I think that they are worth saving for your own backyard if you want to start your own seeds. So I just wanted to show you kind of a difference here. This one, you squeeze it and it's so crinkly, it's so flimsy. This one, it's nice, it's sturdy. The edge of it is really nice. Like you can go like this and it's not just gonna crack and split right down the side like some of them do. They literally just split and then the dirt will start spilling out in that. And then also the bottom of them is very different. Like this one has 4 little slashes, and this one, it has like 16 or 20 very specific holes around the entire thing, not just on the edge. And so what I realized is these ones are gonna last me so much longer than these ones. So I'm gonna keep reusing this until it shreds enough that I deem, okay, it's time to like recycle this plastic, if it can, hopefully the recyclable plastic. But then these ones are ones that I'm gonna keep to use year after year because they actually are gonna last so much longer than these ones will. So I don't know, if you're a seed producer, maybe you can start using these ones. I don't know, there's gotta be different solutions, but anyways, for the lone backyard gardener, just try to find ones that are sturdier that you can reuse. I also have a number of other pots that are larger pots. Those I obviously don't really start seeds in because I'll pot things up into those larger pots. But again, I think it is nice to invest in a couple of nice pots if you do want to have a potted garden, but then just get as much life as you can out of the pots that you just kind of accumulate for free. And then on that note is the kind of the plastic trays that these come with. So again, I think these have different quality differences. Like the newer ones just keep getting thinner and thinner, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper, but like the quality of them is going down. So it's kind of interesting when you're trying to source secondhand stuff, just try to accumulate a few things that are good or better quality for yourself. And so this one that has the like see-through at the bottom, this one can be pretty good for like storing all of these in, but I just had this one inside. I actually have a few outside that have a flat bottom that are like, that don't have any holes in them. So I find that one nice because then you can put all of your pots in and you can bottom water them, which just helps the roots search for the water down, and then you don't have to get the leaves as wet. You know, sometimes your baby plants just get totally knocked over when you water them. And so imagine this to be a full sealed tray. That's kind of more what I've been using outside for bottom watering. And also this year I tried seeding a bunch of them in here. So I filled the whole thing with dirt and then I would seed into it. I found that wasn't hugely successful. It was successful enough, honestly. I would pot up the strong looking seedlings into the 4-inch, and then from the 4-inch they would really take off and do better there. But I did find that very quickly the roots would grow to the bottom because of how shallow these trays are, and so you do have to pot up the seedlings quite quick. I had more success for the plants that I started in 4-inch pots that I spaced out nicely. So for example, I might put like 3 plants into one 4-inch pot, and then they would grow and they'd actually have room to grow until they were strong enough that I would then plant them into my actual backyard garden. So I think going forward, I would probably do that method instead. That's also nice too, because some seeds are going to germinate and grow faster than other seeds will. And so it can be nice when you have all the same type of seed in one unit. as opposed to having multiple different rows of things in one larger container. So there's kind of different pros and cons to it. And then in terms of the like lasting sustainability of the items that I have, I was actually able to find this tray for $1 at a thrift store. And I know that this is going to have so much longer of a life than these other plastic trays are. So this can be really great when you just are able to thrift a couple items that can be utilized for your gardening supplies. And this was honestly kind of miraculous. It perfectly fit. I think it was 20 or so, maybe 24 of the 4-inch pots. And so I was really pleased about that. It spaced out really nicely. I didn't really plan that, but it's a nice tray. It almost feels like a cafeteria tray of sorts. So if you were able to get that, even like a metal gardening, like a metal baking dish, I think would work really well also. But this is nice because it's sturdy. Like you could hold it in one spot and it be heavy and this still be able to support the plants that you have in it. Whereas something like this, when you hold it and it's heavy, they can start to twist and warp. And so that's just can be a little more risky when you're trying to transport your plants places. And then this was really nice too because the lip had like a little bit of space so I could water the bottom, and still I couldn't really bottom water as much because it's a smaller lip. So maybe it'd be ideal if it was like an extra 1/2 inch bigger, but I still found this really nice because it would catch the extra water at the bottom just to help hydrate my plants a little further. And then the other things that I've been using for my seed starting is labels. So it's definitely incredibly easy to forget what you planted. Some plants, it's really obvious. Others, or if it's a new plant that you haven't started from seed before, you might not be able to recognize it from the little tiny seedling. And so it can be really helpful to label. Oh, one other tool that I didn't bring here is actually just masking tape. So I found masking tape to be useful as well. So if you didn't want to use sticks, you could just use a little piece of masking tape right on the outside of your pot, and that could be quite handy as well. But I've just been using popsicle sticks. You can obviously get these at a craft store. I was able to find a ton at a thrift store for even cheaper, which was great. But one note on the popsicle sticks is that these do have a shorter life, but what's nice is that the wood can be just put back into your compost bin. And so if you were to leave these popsicle sticks out all year, they're going to get really gray, really discolored. I also found that a regular pen would fade away and then I couldn't see what was written on them anymore. So I have had to use Sharpie. Now, I don't think it's an issue if you put Sharpie and then go and put it in a compost. I know that there'd be like a little bit of not ideal stuff in the Sharpie that then would be going into your compost, but I think it's such a small amount that it like doesn't really matter. So yeah, the popsicle sticks, again, that would be my preference because then you can recycle it again. But if you have something that you grow every single year and you just want to save the labels for it, then you can get these really thin plastic labels, which you could also make out of recycled plastic from your own like grocery purchases and that. Just cut out a shape that's similar to this and use that instead. But then this you could write on with Sharpie, and then say you always grow the same variety of tomatoes or something like that every year, then you could just save this for the next year and keep reusing them, which is an option as well. So those are all the supplies that I use for seed starting. The last thing that I want to show you are some different things, not really fertilizers, I guess, but the different things that I'm kind of using as soil amendments, and talk about where I've been sourcing some of my soil specific supplies in my first couple years of gardening. Alrighty, our last section here. So let me talk first about the thing that I'm kind of phasing out of, but the thing that I did start first with. So back when I just kind of got into gardening at the beginning, I was gifted this ProMix organic vegetable and fruit garden fertilizer. So I knew that I wanted something that was going to be organic, and the Omni listed is kind of a good label to look for. And so I thought this was a pretty solid purchase at the time. It's these little granulars that you can either put in water and then water it out, or you can sprinkle it around and then water over top of it to get the garden, to get it in. And so this is kind of just your typical nitrogen, phosphorus, whatever kind of blend. And so that worked pretty good. I don't really know. It's kind of hard to tell what it did, if anything. Some of these other things that I've added into the soil, I've noticed a greater effect on, but it can be a little bit hard because I haven't really done any experiments to isolate any of the variables. So perhaps I'm not really commenting on what is working best here. These are just the things that I've been gravitating to across my first couple years. So this is what I started with. Solid choice if that's the only thing that's accessible to you. Just find like a nice organic fertilizer if you think that your plants need it. One thing that I would actually start with before this, if you're a brand new gardener, is just actually adding a bunch of organic matter to your garden beds. So if you're working with pots, you can do this as well, but definitely if you have in-ground or raised beds, this is going to work phenomenally. Every single fall, gather all the leaves you can and just put a bunch of leaves on top of your soil. I'm pretty sure that leaves have like 11 of the 15 nutrients that your plants need, something like that. And so just by adding a whole bunch of leaves and then that decomposing into your soil, that is going to help give your plants the nutrients that they need. Also, I think a lot of people kind of without realizing it are adding too many nutrients to their soil. Like you don't really need to be buying fertilizers. Obviously depends on your soil. It's kind of hard to, okay, I won't try to like diagnose, I guess, what's going on with your soil. I'll just talk to the things that I have been using. But leaves is something that I've been using. I've just been adding a ton of leaves on top of my beds, and I've noticed a huge difference in the water retention as well as the color of the soil and just the plant survival rate in the garden beds as well. And so by adding a bunch of leaves on top, it's been helping keep in a nice moisture temperature. And then I've just totally noticed that the soil is just, I don't know, it's becoming like nice and loamy in that. And it kind of started off like a lot sandier, I guess. And so that's been working really well, just adding organic matter. And I would do a bunch of different things. Like I would just be chopping anything and everything that, like sometimes I would go to little community pathways, and if I found a bunch of things that looked like straw, then I would take a little bunch of that home and cut it up and add it on. Or if I harvested something and then I had some like scraps, I would just put it into the garden. I haven't been putting kitchen scraps in just because I think that's a little riskier with the animal life, including like the dogs that are like live on this property. And so I haven't been doing that. I've just been doing anything that's just like foliage that's been coming from the garden, I've added in. That would be where I would start, honestly, if I did nothing else. And then the second thing that I started doing, which I think has made, I don't know, it's like, I think something really helpful to do, and I think it's been significant, but again, I should run some tests. That'd be kind of fun. But anyways, I have added, it's called activated EM. It's called microbial inoculant. So basically it's like adding probiotics to your soil. It's like all the bacteria that are needed in your soil, you can add it in, and this is like a concentrated thing. And so you'd add it to water and then pour it onto your soil. And so then this just helps boost the microbial life in your soil. So the reason why I got this, and I think it made such a difference for my garden, is because it started off, the garden beds that I started off with when I moved here were just like totally dry. They looked like dusty and gray. Like it just looked like it had totally dried out, and the microbes wouldn't have been able to survive in that type of environment. They were just like way too exposed. And so I think adding this in has really helped. And I've noticed that like the organic matter that I've been adding in has been decomposing, and then larger bugs and worms and things like that have been slowly coming in as well. And obviously I can see those, but I can't see the microbes. And so that was kind of a visual indicator to me of, oh, okay, if these larger things are here, then hopefully that means all the smaller things are here as well. And so this is really, I think, great to add, because if your soil is low on nutrients, but it has a lot of microbes, then that's actually better than your soil being really high in nutrients with no microbes, because the microbes are required to help get the nutrients into the plant. And the microbes can like help make the nutrients more available to the plants. And so this has been really awesome. And then kind of in conjunction with that, I've been using humic acid and sea kelp. So on a farm that I actually volunteer with, we've been using fish liquid and kelp. And so I think those are really solid choices. But the thing that I've been using in my own home garden is humic acid and sea kelp. And sometimes what I would do as well is put a little humic acid as well as the microbes into the water together, because the water that I have out of the tap, I believe, has a little bit of chlorine in it. And so the humic acid can bind to the chlorine, and then that means when I add the microbes that the chlorine isn't going to kill off any of the microbes. And so the humic acid with the microbes is a nice combination that way. I've also been putting both of those into a spray bottle and using it as a follicular spray. So I had one spot where there was just kind of some like weird discoloring happening to the leaves, and it didn't really look like a nutrient thing. It looked like it might have been more of like a fungal issue or something. And so I would try to remove the leaves, but then also spray the plant with this, and that really helped, I think. So that is kind of like this little recycled spray bottle has been something that I've been finding is quite helpful in my gardening supply toolkit, as well as these guys here. And then the last thing that I just started experimenting with is actually coal. So these microbes are really, really tiny, and they need tiny little homes to live in. Like, you know, some people will add little houses that are the right size for bees in their backyard because they need a little spot to live over the winter. So basically the holes that are in charcoal are the right size for little tiny microbes in your soil. And so I was camping and I decided, hey, I'm going to save some of these bits of charcoal and bring them back to my garden. So I actually put them out in much larger chunks than I should have. So next time I do this, I'm going to like mash these up a bunch so that they're a lot smaller, and then just mix that into my soil. And that is going to create like little homes and little hotels for the microbes in the soil. And this like was a free resource, right? This just came from the bottom of the fire pit. And so I think that's pretty awesome. You definitely don't need to like be out purchasing a number of different things. My past self, if I could do it again, I would just get humic acid and the microbes, because humic acid also has a bunch of different minerals in it as well. And so I kind of think it makes more sense to lean that direction rather than getting a fertilizer that only has like 3 key nutrients, because your plants still need the other nutrients too. And if you want to be eating those nutrients from the plants that you're growing, then those plants need those nutrients available. You know what I mean? So I think the humic acid is just kind of a good play for that. So these are what you could call kind of my little soil amendments for the home garden that I've been using. I've been gardening for a few years. I kind of have to remember. It started off as a little balcony garden, then it's transitioned to a backyard garden. And this is my 3rd year now, kind of working with different garden mentors. I started in somebody's backyard garden. It was an insane backyard garden. I learned so much about like just how much you can fit into a space and how healthy soil can look and feel. And then I've been working on a herbal medicine farm and kind of volunteering / working. And that has been a cool learning opportunity as well, to learn more about this climate and just see what they're working with at like a slightly bigger scale than my own backyard, and kind of taking inspiration from that. So that's been really neat as well. So yeah, I hope that you learned a few things about the different gardening supplies that are out there, different things that are accessible that you really don't have to pay for. I definitely recommend just trying to thrift or find for free on Facebook Marketplace, or just use supplies like leaves that just exist out there that you can just go out and find. You do not need to pay a lot of money for your gardening supplies. And if you're really into it and you want to ask for Christmas for a hori hori or something like that, then you can do so. But yeah, it's like so fun. It's so easy to get started. And hopefully this gives you some inspiration to just keep slowly upgrading the things you're working with. Just keep learning about the things you're working with. And I'm thankful for this chance to garden and learn myself, and to be able to watch this video back in the future on the different things that I was doing at the beginning of my gardening career, if you want to call it that, and because I hope to be gardening for the rest of my life. So I think it'll be really neat to look back and see all the learnings over the years. And I wish you the best of luck at the beginning of your gardening journey.